Hello lovelies. Today we're going to talk about the bridge collapse in Baltimore. Now, you might be familiar with this channel as a games review chat channel, but I have a lot of interests, and amongst them is atheism and skepticism. Basically, I do YouTube wrong, and I've been doing reviews and commentary on the RPG scene consistently because that's what the algorithm likes. But I'm bad at YouTube, so yeah, I had a desire to be less involved in politics, etc., because it's so wearing. But this has the conspiracy theorists all aflutter, and while we don't know much of anything yet, more will emerge, and I recognise the patterns of conspiracist behaviour from 9/11, Columbine, and more recently the COVID conspiracy theories. Alright, so what are the facts? The Francis Scott Key Bridge was a continuous through truss bridge constructed from 1972 to 1977. A continuous through truss bridge is one that continuously passes through several supports or trusses. In theory, this is a superior design because it distributes weight evenly across its entire structure. However, obviously, it's designed to resist downward loads, not strikes against its supports. This collapse risk is a known problem with continuous truss bridges. They're superior in some regards, and in some other regards have issues. All designs are a compromise. The Francis Scott Key Bridge was hit in one of its central struts, where the structure as a whole is at the most risk. Without that support, the load was too much for the remaining trusses, and it was unbalanced, and so you have a catastrophic collapse. You can see on the video and in pictures of the bridge from before it that the two central support trusses in the middle of the bridge have 4 legs instead of 2, helping to distribute the load. And I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure out what happens when you knock out one leg from a 4-legged table or chair. It was struck by a huge container vessel, the MV Dali. The ship was constructed in the 20-teens in South Korea, owned and operated by a Danish shipping company, Maersk, operating under a Singaporean flag, previously owned by Ocean Bulk Maritime SA, a huge Greek shipping company, chartered by Maersk. At nearly 10,000 TEU, the Dali was about double the capacity of the largest cargo carriers of the 1970s, which were around 4,000 TEU. In case you're wondering, a TEU is a 20-foot equivalent unit, one of those cargo containers you're probably familiar with. Now, we know that the Dali lost power and drifted into the bridge, striking it, and even at low speed, that's a lot of weight, and therefore energy, striking the bridge at its weakest and most vulnerable point. But this is not actually that suspicious, as that span between the 4-legged trusses is the widest, and so normally the safest for shipping to pass through. The Dali also has previous for collisions. In Antwerp in 2016, it crashed into the container terminal in Antwerp, so, it's happened before to an extent. In 2023, some extremely minor fault was noted in its gauges, and so on, but this was repaired and not flagged as serious. But if there's any defect in the ship that led to this, that seems the most fruitful line to go down. We know the bridge collapsed at around 1:30 AM when traffic and usage was low, with some amount of forewarning, and with the crew doing all they could to avoid the collision, dropping anchor, steering hard, but without power, steering doesn't have that much effect on these big ships. Now, any event can start to look fishy if you examine it with conspiracist eyes. Any event consists of many coincidences until it seems impossible, but that is meaningless. The chances of shuffling a deck of cards properly and then drawing them out all in order by number and suit is like 1 in 10 to the 68th. Right? But that is true of any order of cards, no matter what. So every time you shuffle and draw a 1 in 10 to the 68, the chance thing is happening, right? So rare, weird things happen all the time, we just don't notice them. But let's consider, It's not in the interest of the owners, the operators, the US government, the Singaporean government, the Greek government, the Sri Lankan government, where it was headed, or the Danish government, for this bridge to have collapsed. Right? The effect upon an important US deepwater port will be considerable at a time when global sea trade is still under tremendous strain from other things. Some will say that this provides a motivation for bad actors, and sure, to an extent, but they had no means by which to cause this to happen, only motive. And even then, for all the hostility with China, for example, China still very much depends on global trade, and the West trades a great deal with China. There is no indication of dynamite or other explosives being used to bring the bridge down, as has been claimed. We have multiple witnesses and cameras from multiple sources. We have audio. Yeah, there were flashing lights on the bridge and city lights behind it that may have shone through the struts and so on as the camera person moved. But we don't hear any explosions in the numerous recordings, only the sounds of the collapse. It is not in the interests of globalists to damage global trade. Indeed, their love of global free trade is what gives them their name, globalist free markets, rather than internationalism. Any terrorist group would want to cause maximum carnage. Striking the bridge at 1:30 AM is suboptimal if you're a terrorist group, since it means casualties were minimal. The main named casualties at this point being a maintenance crew who were there to upkeep the bridge, not to tear it down. Nobody with the motive had the opportunity, nobody with the opportunity had the motive. So why are we then seeing conspiracy theories flying around? Well, setting aside the attempts to exploit the disaster for political advantage, which is just naked opportunism, largely by right-wing sociopaths, there is a problem with human psychology. Humans are pattern-seeking engines. We see intention even when there isn't any. We see things and people even when they're not there, like seeing a human face in a tortilla, right? It's called pareidolia, and it's because we're so attuned to pick out agency, to pick out people or animals or nefarious intent, to the point where we see it when it's not even there. You imagine a caveman walking through a primeval forest. Here's a twig crack. Is it a cave bear? Is it Crunk coming to kill him? Is it just a rotten branch? If you assume that it's something horrible and you react in that way, you are more likely to survive than if you ignore it, even if it turns out to be nothing, right? So this is why we have this flaw in our psychology. It's not really a flaw from other points of view, but when it comes to events like this, it's a flaw. And there's another problem we have psychologically. We tend to think that big events must have big causes commensurate to the scale of the event. To that way of thinking, something as major as the Twin Towers or this, can't just be a handful of terrorists hijacking a plane, or it can't just be an accident, right? The US is a big, powerful country. This was a big, powerful construction. It can't possibly be anything else. To challenge our power, it must be something huge. But that's just not how things work. This is a huge event, a huge construction that just collapsed. To the layman and to the non-critical thinker, it feels like that can't possibly be an accident. They think it must, again, be part of some global conspiracy by nefarious powers. But no, unsatisfying as it might be, shit happens. Now, often for no reason at all, and often with an impact far outstripping the cause. You've seen those pictures, the meme of the tiny little domino scaling up to the big domino. It's true, small events can lead to big events. I'll repeat though, we don't really know much yet. More details will emerge. The sane and sensible thing to do is to wait and see and not be led down the garden path just by hungering for information. If I were a betting man though, I'd bet everything on this being a pure accident and nothing more. Right? But if we don't debunk this nonsense from the get-go, however futile an attempt that might be, rumours and nonsense spread, as we've seen. It's a thankless task, but we have to do it. Zang. Postmortem Studios, role-playing games, and a lot more to die for. Post-mort.com.
Well, I look at it myself as the beginning, really, of an exploration. That's the reason we're exploring. You don't know what you'll run into on an exploration. What the sky looks like, what the stars look like. Do they still twinkle, or are they a steady light when you get outside the atmosphere?